Good day, folks. It's been a long while. I haven't done one of these since April 2021, I don't believe. And I should have kept them in chronological order, and I should have done them earlier because a number of years has passed since working on these albums. And the one I'm going to talk about today is Space, the sequel to Time in some senses, and the prequel to Dimensions, and the middle album, and what is probably classified as the trilogy of Time, Space and Dimensions, though it was never intended that way. The album Space was purely and simply a sort of, I suppose, really a tribute to Jean-Michel Jarre's work, and based on the Oxygen album. I'm going to push that away now, and hopefully that's not going to knock anything. And the I think more than anything, that is paramount to the reason why that particular album was created. I just wanted to make an album based simply on 6 tracks, all of which are the same length and in the same sort of genre as Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen album. So as per usual, I will start with track 1. When I say as per usual, what I'm led to believe, because I haven't looked back on previous studio talks, but part of my memory sort of reflects on the fact that I think I used to talk about each track in order. I suppose I've always worked that way. I'm sort of always worked chronologically, or tried my best to. And actually, that brings me around to thinking that the very last studio talk I did was based on the remixes opposed to even the albums. And please don't get distracted by the fact I'm wearing a pulp shirt, because I've had a good year washing pulp this year. But it's just it's the first t-shirt I found to wear today. So get back to the conversation. So spatial awareness is part 1. Oh yeah, and this another thing, that Tangerine Dream and Jean-Michel Jarre quite into their parts opposed to just names of tracks. And again, I had to follow this route, I suppose. And I've only done it on the trilogy albums, I believe. Oh no, maybe there's 1 or 2 other tracks. But anyway, I'm going to divulge and talk about other things as I usually do if I don't stay on track. So, so this one's Space Part 1, Spatial Awareness. Now, it took a while actually to work out how to do this, because it's weird with some projects. They're not always so easy as you first think, and I don't know why I've ever thought any of these projects were easy to do. But over time, I just got used to sitting down and starting to compose these things. And I think it was necessary, and it's probably, you can tell in the whole way through the spatial awareness track that it takes a little while to grow and build, and it was really odd, because in order to recreate my own work based on someone else meant that I had to use the same mythology as someone else, but without having with having my thoughts on the process, rather than getting inside the mind of someone who's doing their thing. But as I'm discovering in recent days, recent weeks and months, working on my older material, reworking some of my older material that I feel deserves reworking. When you're making a brand new track, it just seems so much easier than the process of trying to recreate something. And so I suppose to some extent, with the Time album, I was allowed to go wherever I wanted, but with Space I was hemmed in a little. I had to follow a sort of structure, I had to follow a procedure, and slowing it down and stretching it out and making it the same length, and yet keeping the same sort of ambient sound. Yeah, it was all rather interesting when I think about it, and I'm surprised really I haven't spoken about this album much sooner. But sometimes it's just finding time and being in the mood really to make one that even one of these videos, because they're, don't know, they're interesting, and I hope that people watching find them interesting. Um, but it's yeah, I don't know. Anyway, forget that. So that's part one was still an introduction. Part two is more like the building, but still staying with the same remit as track one. And I do remember, as I started to work on track two, I just, yeah, I suppose in some respects, thinking back, I couldn't sort of contain myself and stick completely with the boundaries I'd originally started with. And track two, I remember once I'd completed that and got this sound that I wanted, um, yeah, I just was quite stunned and amazed. Um, excuse me. Um, but very happy, very happy with the outcome. Um, and when I talk about track three, I'm sort of, because I've been rereading things associated with this album to sort of try and lump everything in together uh, within the same uh, studio talk. Um, and I had a review done by a man called Paul Rigby for his audiophile um, website, and he when it comes to talk about part three, he seems to think that part three should have been the final track. But I think he, even though he drew comparisons to Tangerine Dream, Jean-Michel Jarre in his review, I don't think he fully understood what I'd been trying to do. Though I'm sure to some degree I'd actually mentioned it to him. But he seems to think that track three should have been the final track in the album, due to its more vibrancy and fun and bouncy type thing. But going back to, if you listen to Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen, and you get to part three, it's the same sort of thing. And that's where, if you like, if this wasn't based on the principles of another album or trying to work around a concept without making it sound exactly the same, making it your version of the same, it was just, I don't know. That's probably, now I'm starting to realise why it's tricky talking about making a video and discussing the album, because it's kind of, it wasn't like working on my own work, though it was, but it's very complex to explain what was going on in my mind and the things that was keeping, that were containing me from doing things and actually putting, if you like, tracks in different orders. Just wasn't possible after committing to the theme of what I was trying to do. So yeah, Temporal Zone for sure is a totally different vibe altogether. Now, when it comes to track four, which is Relativity here, and track part six, which is Gravitation, this was really interesting because by now getting into the zone of Jarre's most prolific pieces of work, which was Oxygen 4 and I think maybe the B-side 6, there was definitely, because of that wave effect, things that drew similarities to them two tracks. And I knew right from the off that once I got the track, let's say track 4, in order, I'd have to somehow dabble with it and do some sort of different kind of reconstruction with the same sounds going forward for track 6. So I had to, you know, I started, because I've always been self-taught and just, I don't know, dabbling with things and experimenting with things. It was quite fun and fascinating actually to put myself into that mode, but I needed to get that sort of dynamic sound. Not that I knew I was going to get a number one hit or something high up in the charts with this track, but to me, I felt compelled to make in track 4 the most unique track within the album. I think at the time I felt like I had done. Listening back, I'm not so sure, but I think ultimately, and I know this means I'm jumping to track 6 and missing out track 5 just for the moment, I felt like it brought something else to the table, because when working on track 6, I loved tweaking, fiddling with things from track 4 to make track 6, if that kind of makes sense. Though they do sound different as they go through, but there was a lot of bits of track 4 in track 6, I remember. And I just remember feeling I'd actually may have given myself too much to chew on, or a task that was going to be much more difficult than I thought. Well, in fact, I did, but I just had to keep working. That's the way I work. I always try and find a way. And then going back to track 5 again, keeping with the whole concept, the lengths of tracks, etc. I felt a bit more carte blanche with track 5 actually, and over time I've actually quite liked to listen to track 5 because it's. I recognise if you listen to Jean-Michel Jarre's Part 5, it is just all over the shop and has no true consistency. It's a kind of it's definitely a sort of experimentation type, meandering type sounds that just go off. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to completely try and stick to the path here. I think I've got more. I felt there was more of me in Part 5, and with this ability to actually make, well, just I don't know. I was still desperately trying to keep the theme. There's without shadow of doubt, you'll notice there's not as many beats and drum beats, etc., going on amongst this, because that was another thing. I had to tone that down. I had to sort of control my usual feeling like, hang on a minute, that sounds really good, sticking this in. It had to continue remaining on the theme, especially the space theme, and in truth the sort of electronic sound that generally doesn't usually have beats and bass and so on. And concluding this really, I ended up bolting on Solar Energy, the mechanical mix, which I don't think I'd done a remix of any of my tracks up until that point, but felt at the time that the Solar Energy track from an EP I'd done earlier just seemed to have the same sound and fit in the same true genre of the rest of the album. So I added it on as a bolt-on, but then confused Paul Rigby in his review because he didn't quite understand why it was there. And of course I didn't call it a part either, but that just sort of explains that. Overall, what I'm really happy with, though I'm not really happy with either two audio outputs I made, because the album was remastered as well, but I do really need at some point to go back to this album and work on the work and remastering myself, because track 2 in particular has lost some of the essence of the track within the mastering, and I wasn't mastering in them days. I used to send my mastering out, and it seems that both of them people were very good at what they were doing, just couldn't somehow recreate the sound of the original version before mastering, and that could be for all sorts of things, congestion, just noise. I don't know, but I do want to see if I can work on that track 2 and enhance that. But what I did do subsequently was make a video called, I'm just going to look it up here, so I called it Space the Video, and albeit it's lots of stock library video because I'm not going to go out to space and film space, etc. I managed to, I believe I managed to create not a bad 43-minute video based on the whole album, of a journey from a space rocket going, from the ground, from the Earth, out into space and beyond, and then coming back, using the original music that wasn't mastered. So in essence, even though it's going to be quieter, and perhaps it's going to, if it peaks in certain places, it's going to distort, but in certain areas, especially that track 2, then you'd be able to potentially hear the track as it was meant to be. And I think all in all, then I'll conclude this video, because I don't really think there was much else to talk about on the album, but just giving you some background to it, the reasons why I did it, and my thoughts. And as I said, there's a review, I believe, yeah, on the Audiophile Man website. And that's dated back to the 18th of March 2017. So yeah, that's a long time ago. Staying true to my other studio talks, I actually was looking back and realising how old and scruffy I looked in previous ones, and I thought I must do the same when I do this one. So hopefully I've managed to succeed in looking pretty much the same too. So thank you for tuning in. I wish you a good day. Take care.